Hi, welcome to another episode of MYD Global. I'm your host, Leanne Hackman-Carty. Disasters can wreak havoc on the environment, whether it's floods or fires or tornadoes. Obviously, there's a need to repair the environment and all of the ecosystems as a result. Thankfully, there's people like Tim Christophersen. He's the head of the Nature for Climate branch at the UN Environment Program in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm talking to him today about some of the work they're doing in developing a platform, a portal of best practices, and some real tangible activities people can be doing on the front lines. So stay tuned as I talk to Tim about what he is doing with his organization to help bring best practices forward for communities around the world. Hi, Tim. How are you doing today?
Hi, very well. And you?
Good, good. Well, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to talk to me today about some really important issues, especially when it comes to resilience and communities and their ecosystems, their natural ecosystems. Before we get started, can you just explain a little bit about your background?
Sure. I'm a forester by training, and one thing I've learned in forests is that you have to think long term. Trees are quite long-lived creatures, and forests, there's more to a forest than the number of trees. That's also something that applies both to human societies and to ecosystems. So there's a lot of similarities between social systems and ecosystems. So that's my background. Right now I work at the UN Environment Program. I'm based in Nairobi at our headquarters, and I coordinate our global work on any linkages between nature and climate change. So I have a lot to do with disasters, and unfortunately more and more so.
You work a lot in the area of resilience. So can you talk to me a little bit about how would you define resilience?
To me, resilience means the ability to bounce back from any unfortunate event, or that's maybe that's too much a human term, but from a disturbance, you would say, in an ecosystem. And the ability to bounce back and buffer against disturbances is a big part of resilience, and the ability to adapt. So we have social resilience and ecosystem resilience. And again, those two are similar, and they're also linked because, of course, most of our societies depend on ecosystems for water, for food, for all the basic necessities of life.
Some of the programs, the initiatives that you're doing within the UN in your particular area?
Right now, I spend a lot of time to prepare a new UN decade. So for the next 10 years, we will be focusing on the UN decade on ecosystem restoration to rebuild some of the damaged ecosystems across the world. We will support the climate agenda, the biodiversity agenda, the humanitarian and development agenda. And for example, one of the goals that we support is to restore 350 million hectares of degraded land. That's an area about the size of India. So it's a big undertaking, but it's a coordinated global effort led by the UN, by us together with the Food and Agriculture Organization, and with hundreds and possibly thousands of partners. And it's starting in a few months.
So that's going to start in January of 2021 is when it's kicked off?
Yeah.
And so are there a number of initiatives being planned to be launched over obviously over the decade? Just curious as to the types of on the ground things that are going to be happening.
Yes, there are hundreds of local initiatives that are already ongoing, and we hear of more and more of them every day that are already happening and that want to be linked to the UN to give them wider visibility, more resources, more political will at national, local level. There are also global initiatives. For example, the World Economic Forum launched under the framework of the UN decade something called the Trillion Tree Challenge, or 1T.org, where they plan to conserve or reforest, regrow 1 trillion trees, which is about 30% more trees than we have on the planet right now. So again, not a small task. But the World Economic Forum, again, works with a large number of private sector organizations who will all be part of this concerted global response under the UN decade to the twin challenges we face of climate change and rapid biodiversity loss.
You mentioned a platform when we were talking earlier. Can you describe what that is?
So on disasters specifically, we run together with other UN agencies a platform called the Ecosystem-Based Disaster Risk Reduction Platform, or PEDR as an acronym, the Platform on Ecosystem-Based Disaster Risk Reduction. And we there collect examples of best practices. Where does it work that we restore wetlands or forests to ensure water quality is improved or water availability is improved in arid regions? We help reforestation efforts. We connect local actors with funders, so projects with investors. There's a lot of work, but much of that is also training and awareness raising. We have a massive open online course, a MOOC on disaster risk reduction using nature-based solutions, and we also have a lot of local initiatives that are again linking to a wider UN platform, because it gives them the access to knowledge, to sometimes funding, and often to more political attention at the local level if they are part of or supporting a UN initiative.
That's great. I know that in my particular region, I'm located in Western Canada, and I know that with floods and with fires, the work that was done post-disaster really is some of the work that you do, whether it's revegetating those riverbanks and making sure that they're solid for next time, or changing the landscape to be more, just to mitigate some of that risk. Is there anywhere that you think in the work that you've done globally, are there some best practices that you could cite that you're saying, this particular area is doing a really good job that people could find out more information on?
So let me give you a few examples. Pakistan has planted several million trees already in the past few years, and is now redirecting its recovery funding, the economic stimulus funding for COVID-19 recovery, to create rural jobs through tree planting and investments in nature. Other countries are doing that as well. France is doing that. New Zealand has just passed a $750 million bill to create jobs using nature-based solutions and restoration of ecosystems. We have in Africa an initiative called the Great Green Wall of the Sahara and the Sahel. So these are 11 countries just south of the Sahara that have gotten together and planned an 8,000 kilometer long ecosystem restoration zone with trees and other ecosystem restoration, not only to slow the spread of the Sahara, but to create an integrated economic development corridor for some of the world's poorest regions. And especially, of course, under climate change, there's more and more out-migration from those areas, not only to Europe, but actually mostly to other African countries, to big urban areas that cannot deal with this migration. So we support these kinds of efforts and think that there has to be a lot more investment in nature and in these kinds of nature-based solutions that we see emerging.
That's great. I mean, it must give you some sense of satisfaction to see that some of the initiatives you're doing today are going to make long-term impact. And so that's fantastic. Is there anything else before we wrap up that perhaps you wanted to mention and I didn't ask about?
Well, it'd be great if we could stay in touch, and I can share with you and your viewers the resources that we are building, including a digital hub for information exchange, where anybody interested in restoring nature, whether it's in Canada or in the US or in Europe or in Africa, can find the right resources, find projects and find investment opportunities, find peers, find groups they can engage with. And that hub will also go live in 2021.
That's great. Well, I will keep in touch, and I'll make sure and share that, and maybe get in touch with you again as you get through the launch and live with those resources. So thank you so much for taking the time today to spend a few minutes talking about the work you do, and wishing you and your colleagues all the best as you carry on.
Thank you very much. Take care and stay safe.